The case moving forward against the man accused of grabbing a young girl out of a park in Saratoga County. Hear from a former FBI agent on what parents around the state can learn following that child's safe return. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. It was an abduction that caught the state, really the whole nation's attention. A 9-year-old girl taken, missing for nearly 48 hours before, thankfully, being found by police and returned to our parents safely. The 9-year-old was abducted while riding her bike in Moreau Lake State Park. Over 400 police searched that park for 2 days on the ground and in the air. Police say the suspect drove up to the family's home, putting a ransom note in their mailbox. After that, they found the suspect's home. Inside was the missing 9-year-old child. Craig Ross Jr. has been charged now with kidnapping. Digging deeper, we're finding that the ransom note placed in the family mailbox was key in finding the missing child. Investigators say able to take a fingerprint from that letter. The print came up as a match in the system to a fingerprint taken from Ross when he was arrested for drinking and driving back in 1999. As police explained, fingerprinting technology has changed a lot in the last 20 years, but the officer's diligent job in the past was able to bring that little girl home.
It's a great example of even 24 years ago, getting a great print, getting great evidence, and having it be used 25 years later to help solve a crime that's a major crime that we should have solved.
I was totally excited. I was really pleased that something so small that I had done 24 years ago resulted in something like this.
That it did. Now, while many in the community are pleased with the return of the missing child, some have asked why it took 15 hours to put out that Amber Alert in the first place. Now, that reason seems to come down to several factors. According to recent data, stranger abductions made up less than 1% of the missing child cases in 2022. While stranger abductions qualify for an Amber Alert, police do try to narrow down other reasons why the child may be missing. Well, one expert explains that over 400,000 children have been reported missing so far this year. If each one of them got an alert, an Amber Alert, that'd be well over 1,000 notifications every day.
Try to confirm that it's an abduction. We have to try to confirm the child's in danger. There's certain things that we have to do. At the scene that night, we had no evidence of an abduction. If we sent out every one of these, nobody's going to pay attention to them.
Now, the kidnapping statistics have improved over the years. From 1990 to 2011, rate of kids being returned from disappearances increased from 62% to 97%. Joining us now is former FBI agent and News Nation contributor Jennifer Coffindaffer, talking us through what we can all learn from the recent case involving that abduction. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We talked a little bit before you came out about Amber Alerts and how they work, and a quick criticism everybody seemed to have is, oh, why'd they take so long? They should have gotten this out within an hour of this young lady disappearing. It doesn't always work that way, right? If that was the case, we'd have these going off every 5 seconds.
Yes and no. In large part, though, I do believe in this case an after actions report will show that it should have been set off much earlier. The whole point of these Amber Alerts was really the Amber Hageman case. And those facts were so much these facts. A young girl who decided to ride her bike a little bit longer. She was riding with her brother. She was snatched from her bike, abducted, and found 4 days later, unfortunately deceased. That case has never been solved. The whole idea of an Amber Alert is that when you believe there's significant information that the person has been abducted, is that an alert goes in. So how do you prove that somebody's been abducted? It's really using deductive reasoning backwards. So you look at what could have happened. First, you look at her caretakers, her parents, who was around her at the time, and you decide through polygraphs, through interviews, through circumstances, phone information, did they have anything to do with her disappearance? Did they kill her or otherwise harm her or abduct her? If that question is a no, that's eliminated. Second question, did she wander off? Did she, put down her bike and see something in the woods and wander off, and is she just lost? You answer that question by conducting a reasonable search of the area that she could have wandered to, this 9-year-old girl. Once those two questions have been answered, then it is time to issue an Amber Alert. If you look at the Summer Wells case, that case, an Amber Alert was done post haste right away. You look at the Michael Bond case, no Amber Alert was ever issued, and he was abducted. So despite a lot of battle to have that alert put on. So I think in this case, they definitely waited too long. They proved those other two prongs were not viable earlier, and that's when the alert should have been initiated.
What advice would you think any parents could take from this whole encounter with this child up in Saratoga County, New York? Is there something we can glean from this to learn with our own kids, our own families, in terms of preventing this beyond just keeping an eye on your kid?
Well, right. That's so cliche, but it's so true in this day and age to keep an eye on your child, that you can just not let them out of the sight. But the other thing is, there really is safety in numbers. And I always teach that in my self-defense classes. If you can just be around others, you significantly reduce the likelihood of being abducted or being harmed.
The FBI was called in on this. What kind of things would they have done to help out in terms of technology or just expertise? They deal with this kind of thing, don't they?
Right. What the FBI brings to these types of cases is several facets. First of all, they bring manpower. They bring manpower to act in the command post, to handle all of these clues and leads that would have been coming in. They also bring the manpower that could help in conducting these searches. They also bring extensive technology, including geofencing that would have been put in place here, including conducting digital analysis of cell phones post haste. They also have lab capabilities, emergency response teams evidence response teams that can analyze the particular crime scene. And then, of course, the expertise of just these agents having dealt in these types of cases over and over again. You have that hindsight, if you will, to help you solve other cases.
Well, I know when abductions are a small percentage of missing children, but it's really a last word from you, and we only have 20 seconds, is that I don't want to use the word luck, but we are lucky this child got home safe, correct?
No, I'm going to use the word luck. I think in law enforcement, luck is such a huge factor. In this case, how lucky were we that a good fingerprint would have been able to be left by this individual and to be gleaned by law enforcement. So it was a lucky and a good day for law enforcement.
Jennifer Coffinduffer, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us about this. I hope we talk again soon.
Thank you, John, for having me.
Well, New York's recent gun law is set to be decided before the nation's highest court. When we come back, we'll hear from state assembly members in response to claims these new laws go after legal gun owners. If you have a comment or story idea, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter. We're at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. New York's gun law is seeing significant legal challenges again. One challenge will be reviewed before the U.S. Supreme Court. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas granting an emergency conference to look into provisions of New York's Concealed Carry Improvement Act, also known as CCIA. That provision did not allow gun owners to carry concealed weapons outside their homes, also kept them from carrying in so-called sensitive locations, which included houses of worship or movie theaters. This also is as different challenges are coming up for a group of gun store owners. They're challenging a new procedure that changes how gun background checks are being carried out. Joining us now to give additional insight into the evolving situation surrounding the state gun laws is Assemblymember Phil Steck. Last week, State Senator Dan Steck had some strong words suggesting additional background checks would not address gun violence. Before we talk to you, Phil, let's listen to that.
Again, if the state that, my colleagues that passed this law were really serious about addressing crime, then let's go back and revisit those failed bail reform laws. Let's do something about migration. Let's focus on those issues. If it saves just one life, to quote you, in that argument, well, then let's look at the bail reform, because that's costing us lives. Let's look at our migration policies, because that's caused all kinds of problems. That's an argument I'll have with if that's the standard for doing something, then I got a list of stuff to talk about.
And again, joining me is Assemblyman Phil Steck. Phil, thanks for coming in. We'll deal with Dan in a second. What's your overall take on this change in the gun laws and the criticism that you're going after law-abiding citizens?
Well, everyone's a law-abiding citizen until they're not. So there are many states that have this. New York didn't have it in exactly this form. We added in ammunition because then you can tell if someone is buying large quantities of ammunition, that's probably not a good sign. So, but many states have this. I have the list with me. Some of them we would think of as not being the most liberal of states, like Florida. And so New York isn't doing anything we haven't always done. People are familiar with the fact that you used to have to go to the county judge to get your permit, but those permit records were all sent to the state police anyway. So this isn't much of a change in the law, and I don't really see any difficulty with it. People have been able to own guns. They've been able to hunt. I don't see a problem with it.
What about the person who says, look, I go to the range a couple times a month. Every time I buy my ammo now, I've got to go through this and I got to pay a tax, this extra little fee. It's not fair to me. I'm a good guy or a good woman, and do it once, but after that, leave me alone.
Everyone says they're good, but obviously we know that there's a percentage of people who aren't, and unfortunately, guns are the type of thing that require some attention because they can cause grave damage to people.
We heard from gun owners as well, not gun owners, gun stores, gun ranges, places that sell ammunition, that they're a little worried about people driving or getting ammunition somewhere else because they don't want to go through the hassle or they don't want to pay the couple bucks. Do you worry about it hurting small business especially?
No, because the surrounding states have it. Connecticut has it, New Jersey has it, Pennsylvania has it. They could go to Vermont, I suppose.
It doesn't bother
I
you
don't
at all?
think it's a significant concern. I've never met a business that liked any kind of regulation.
Right. Now, Dan Steck in the soundbite earlier was talking about we really want to solve crime and issues. We should be dealing with migration. We should be dealing with the border. We should be dealing with. What do you say to that argument? That there's bigger fish to fry here.
Well, the issue of migration is not relevant to this at all because the people, the so-called migrants who are actually here legally because they're seeking asylum in the United States, they're allowed into the country. They may not be allowed to stay forever, but they're allowed in. There's no record of those people at all being involved in any significant amount of crime. We've got plenty of homegrown criminals here in the United States bringing in people who are seeking asylum in the United States. It's not relevant to the question of crime. And Dan also raised the issue of bail reform. Many of the violent crimes already are bailable offenses. Now, I voted against the bail reform because I felt at the time that there was an insufficient listing of the types of offenses that I would consider violent. Personally, I consider gun possession offenses to be violent because if you have an illegal gun, you may be looking to use it against someone unlawfully, whereas if your gun is legally registered, there's a good chance that you're not.
Some people, I would imagine, on the other side as well, with gun owners might think this is another way to collect information on them when they haven't done anything wrong. What do you say to that?
It's been done all over the United States for a long time. I've got a whole list of states that do it. Anyway, when you go hunting, they all know who the hunters are because you got to get a license. This is all a bunch of, in my view, it's political propaganda and nothing more.
Is it also a bit of a reaction, though, from what happened in Buffalo? And is that, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but it seems like after the bad thing happens, we seem to then have a reaction with some laws. And
well, we've been having a problem with gun violence in this country of two different kinds. There's street gun violence and there's mass shootings. We shouldn't confuse the two. So what the other stack is saying has to do with control of street-level gun violence. But these type of laws deal more with the question of mass shootings. So we've been having mass shootings with shocking regularity in this country for some time. And we once had a problem with that, with people, and we all know this from the movies, people riding around with machine guns, gangsters shooting up the place, and Franklin Roosevelt solved that problem. He didn't outlaw machine guns, but in order to get one, you had to get a federal permit and buy it direct from the manufacturer. So that did away with the problem of machine gun violence in the United States. So we are trying to develop an approach that will preserve the right of people to own bear arms, consistent with the Second Amendment, but also consistent with the first clause of the Second Amendment, which talks about a well-regulated militia. That means that government has the right to regulate these things because they are dangerous. You don't want an unregulated people running around with guns. And so we're trying to strike that balance, and that's what this law is doing.
Now we've gotten word as we get towards this interview that Supreme Court now getting involved. They're going to look at it. Are you worried that the court, which is leaning more right now, is going to smack this back again and say redo it or do something different?
Quite frankly, I can't understand. I've been practicing law for 35 years, and I cannot understand sometimes what the courts do. If you look at the decision that Justice Thomas wrote on gun control, he said that the gun control to be valid had to be consistent with the history of gun control in the United States. We're all very familiar with the famous incident, the gunfight at the OK Corral.
Sure.
And what happened in that gunfight was that many Western states had laws that prohibited people, or Western cities had laws that prohibited people from bringing guns into the city limits. And what happened there was the cowboys refused to abide by the laws, and so the U.S. Marshals wanted to disarm them, and that's what led to the gunfight. So that's a pretty extreme gun control law, that you can't bring guns into a city, yet that was the law in many places in the United States, in the West. So I don't understand what this Supreme Court is, quite frankly, driving at. The first clause of the Second Amendment says it's a well-regulated militia. It's not a militia where you get to have any gun you want at any time, under any circumstances.
Well, I have a feeling this issue is not going away, and you and I can talk about it down the road with both stacks. And
well, I quite frankly, from my perspective, as an upstate elected Democrat, I would rather that we focus a lot more on economic issues that would help the great mass of people, and less on these identity issues like I'm pro-gun or I'm not pro-gun. And I think that's a problem across the board in American politics.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Phil Steck, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Drivers across the state will have to deal with new rules on the highways. What you need to know about the changes coming to the state's Move Over law. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also find us and reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter. We're at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. New York State's Move Over law has been expanded. Governor Kathy Hochul recently signing legislation which may come as a surprise to some that it wasn't on the law already. Our Capitol correspondent Jamie DeLine has details.
New York state law requires drivers to move over when they see first responders, tow truck drivers, and law enforcement on the side of the road. Now that law has been expanded even more to include all vehicles that are off to the side.
When it came to my attention, I actually already thought that this was law, meaning that you had to pull over for emergency and non-emergency vehicles. And so this provides continued safety for drivers.
According to AAA, 37 people in New York State were hit and killed on the roadside between 2016 and 2020. That includes emergency responders, tow truck drivers, and drivers whose vehicles were on the roadside. AAA believes this law will save lives. A spokesperson stating, quote, "It simplifies the rules so drivers know that they need to slow down or move over for any and all vehicles on the side of the road." New York joins 17 other states with the passage of this common sense measure. And for drivers that have to pull off to the shoulder,
The same rules still apply. Usually when you pull over, you put your flashers on to indicate that you're pulled over. So none of that changes, right? Those things still remain the same. This is just, again, for folks who are driving on the highways, other roadways that if a vehicle is pulled over, you also need to move over for emergency and non-emergency vehicles that are pulled over.
Senator Webb says this is an effort to expand public safety. The law will go into effect in March. Reporting in Albany, I'm Jamie DeLine.
Stick around, back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Finally, at Empire State Weekly, this past week, the window is opened up now for those looking to enter the cannabis industry. Those interested have until December 4th now to apply. The Office of Cannabis Management is looking to distribute over 1,000 adult-use cannabis licenses. Of those, roughly half will be new retail dispensary places. We spoke with a cannabis expert on the rollout. Here's what he had to say.
Hey, I'm going to give up the bodega and I'm going to open up a cannabis dispensary. If you curtail your storefront and you get rid of everything else that you want to sell and you make it cannabis focused, then you're able to do that.
So you're not selling Ruffles potato chips next to the gummy bears with these things, is what you're basically saying.
Unfortunately, at this time, you could just sell cannabis.
Right. Tune in next week for that full interview. From now, for all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And a quick reminder, don't forget you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across the great state of New York.